Welcome to Understanding the Bible with Pastor Stephen. This is Season 4, Episode 18, 10 Plagues of Egypt. So last time we had discussed the proof that Israel, the Jewish people, were actually in Egypt for about 400 years, just as God prophesied to Abraham in the book of Genesis. Remember, the Jewish race started with Abraham. He was native to the Ur of the Chaldees, which is present-day Iraq. And he went between Canaan and Egypt several times, and God promised him the land of Canaan to his descendants after his descendants had 400 years of affliction in a foreign nation. His son of promise was Isaac. That's in Genesis 17, where God said, Sarah, thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish a covenant with him. And then Isaac had Jacob and Esau. Jacob had 12 sons. Joseph was sold into slavery, ended up becoming the second only to Pharaoh, ruler of the land. Everyone had to obey him. He saved Egypt during the famine, brought his family in, and they came and lived in the land of Goshen. It was 70 people, his brothers and their wives and children, and they became a great nation. Then you read Genesis 47, Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, thy father and brethren are come, and he gave them the land of Goshen to dwell, which is the northern delta of the Nile River, the northern Egypt, which later split into two kingdoms. And I believe that they are the Hyksos kingdom that ruled that part of Egypt for 100 years, that was then overthrown by the Egyptians. And that's described in Exodus 1. If you Google it, the Hyksos were a Semitic people who ruled over parts of ancient Egypt, primarily the Nile Delta, during about 1700 to 1500 BC. Their name means rulers of foreign lands, suggesting they were foreign rulers who took over that part of Egypt. And then again, Google says their origin and identity is likely a group of West Semitic people who migrated from the Near East, potentially from Canaan or the Syrian desert. Their language and culture are thought to have been influenced by the Hebrews. Why? Because they spoke Hebrew and their buildings and their utensils were Hebrew in nature. Interesting, huh? All right, so the story of the 10 plagues and what we're going to get into today, just remember that narrative that the modern world really tries to make it sound like history doesn't fit what the Bible says. They don't want to say Jews. They don't want to say Israelites. So you'll notice Semitic people is always used in regards to that area of the world when they find Jewish stuff. So, and of course, modern day anti-Semitism means anti-Jewish. So Semites are Jews. I know there's several offshoots of there, but it's not all Jewish. But also you've got to understand the time period that they keep talking about from Canaan, which is where Abraham settled. God led him there and promised him that land, right? And of course, the emphasis of Hebrew culture that you constantly see in academia. They don't want to use the word Jew. Understand, Jews don't speak Jewish. Jews speak Hebrew. So when they say Hebrew culture, that's not a race of people. There is no Hebrew people. There's a Hebrew language. So they say that so that they don't have to credit Jews with historical facts. Americans speak English. We don't speak America. Canadians don't speak Canadian. They speak French. Chinese people, yes, there is Chinese language, but the majority of them speak Mandarin. All right. In reality, all these descriptions, the rulers of Egypt, the foreigners that came in, they explicitly fit the Bible story of the Jews going to Egypt, saving Egypt, becoming rulers of Egypt, and then being defeated by Egypt and enslaved, and then later being pushed out of Egypt. That fits the Bible story of the Exodus. So here's the Exodus story. Here's the story. You read the book of Exodus. Chapter 1 tells about how a Pharaoh rose up who didn't know Joseph and enslaves the Jews. Then chapter 2 talks about the birth of Moses and the priestly tribe of Levi, which is, where he was from. And then chapter 3, he sees the burning bush and God tells him, I am Yahweh. I am that I am. And he sends him back to Egypt. And that in chapter 4, he returns to Egypt, talks to Pharaoh. Chapter 5, Pharaoh makes it harder on the slaves. Now they're forced to find their own straw to make bricks. They're not given the straw to make the bricks to build the buildings and the monuments and everything. Chapter 6 gives you the genealogy of Moses that proves he's from the tribe of Levi. Then chapter 7 through 11 gives 9 plagues, and chapter 12 talks about the Passover and that 10th plague. Now, here's the importance of these 10 plagues of Egypt. Exodus 18:11. This is Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, talking, and he says, "Now that I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them." So the Bible tells us that the different gods of Egypt that they dealt proudly with, and what I mean by that is the God of specific things that they were in charge of. That's what that means, they dealt proudly with. So the thing that they were in charge of, God proved that he was better than them at it. So he's proving to foreign nations, and Jethro was a foreigner, okay? His father-in-law, he was not Hebrew. He saw that the God of Moses was better than all the gods of Egypt because of these plagues. And then if you look at chapter 12, the significance of the Passover, that's huge. We're not really going to get into that too much today, but they spared the firstborn son from death. There was the substitution of the spotless lamb to save the family. Remember later on, Jesus is the spotless lamb. He's the Lamb of God, right? And then the blood on the doorposts, only the blood of the spotless lamb could save them. So that's the eternal blood of God. It's a looking forward to, I forget the literary term for it, foreshadowing, I think, of what was coming in the future with the Messiah. And this was the main ordinance to be observed every year. Every Jew would always be taught and would know the story because they would celebrate the Passover every year. So young children would learn the sacrifice of a spotless lamb, an innocent an innocent little animal to save their family. They would also have the knowledge of death and blood required to secure freedom. The whole exodus from slavery and everything. They would also understand the importance of obeying God, learning the meaning of disobedience. If you disobeyed, you died, or your firstborn son died, right? So disobedience to God is sin. They learned this through the celebration of the Passover, and understanding the consequences of sin is literally death, which is that 10th plague. Of course, they also understood the important principle of bringing others into the family, adoption, strangers, sojourners, truth seekers, people who desire to worship the true God can become part of their family. Exodus 12:38 says, "A mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds and even very much cattle." That word for mixed multitude is the word Arab or Arab, mongrel race or mixed or mingled people. This is proof that people, and I wanted to say that these people that went up with them, they weren't just merely along for the ride. They weren't merely other slaves that wanted to escape, okay? Yes, there was that element, don't get me wrong, but this is proof that these Arab people were committed to the true God. If you read the next couple of verses, all the way through verse 48, Exodus 12, "When a stranger shall sojourn with thee and will keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it, and he shall be as one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof." These people were willing, think about it, grown men, even teenage men, young boys that have hit puberty and stuff, like, you're taking out their penis and circumcising it. That's some serious freaking commitment, guys. You think about that, saying, well, hey, if you want to eat this meal, you have to drop your pants and we're going to cut your private part. I'm sorry, no. There's not a man on earth that's going to do that unless he's freaking committed wholeheartedly to what that stands for. That's huge. All right. That circumcision is huge. That's why they did it, to prove their dedication to God that they truly wanted to worship this God as opposed to the gods of Egypt. Being a man, I can't emphasize that enough, guys. No person in their right mind is going to do that unless it's worth it. I'd rather die than have you manhandle my private part like that and start cutting me. Okay. That's just horrid. And I'll maybe another day I'll talk about circumcision and whether or not it should be done today. It's definitely not wrong because God ordained it. But there's a lot of symbolism in there is that you're willing to give some of your own blood. You're willing to make a literal sacrifice of your own body. And I'm not talking about the pagan blood drinking rituals and whatever else you've read about of, the false gods and stuff. And the beauty of it is that God does not require it anymore. He sent Jesus Christ and these laws are done away with. So God is not a bloodthirsty God. But blood is required to pay for sin, and that's why Jesus Christ died on the cross. So that's the whole purpose of the Passover, okay? There's a lot in there, but the Passover is freaking huge, and the Jews learn every single bit of this history every year. Now let's get into the 10 plagues, okay? Because I wanted to talk about the defeat of the false gods. If you look at Exodus 18, 10, and 11, this is where we know this is why God did these things. And Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord, who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who hath delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them." So there's different scholars' interpretations in regards to which false gods God was repudiating here with these 10 plagues. The Bible doesn't specify which ones, okay? But ancient Egyptians worshipped over 2,000 different gods and goddesses. Each god played a specific role in life, had a specific influence over various aspects of life. So I've browsed and done a little bit of research, and this is a list of the gods that are most associated with the 10 plagues. And scholars think that God chose these particular 10 plagues to show his power over the most powerful and most well-known gods of Egypt. So I may be off on a couple of these. I've gleaned from scholars on the internet, okay, and read commentaries and things. Some of these may be off, but understand multiple gods had reign over multiple areas. Like there wasn't only one sun god Ra. There was like 5 or 6 different gods, and then they all were like family members and the wife and the sons of Ra and stuff like that. So lots of gods in Egyptian culture had power of the sun. Okay, so you can't just nail down one and say that the plague of darkness was just specifically against this god. It was a repudiation against all the false gods that dealt with giving light to Egypt when God did the darkness. Does that make sense? So that's the idea. So step one, the first miracle was turning water into blood. Exodus 7, verse 20. "And Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. And the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank." So that gets rid of the idea that it was just plankton. Okay. "And the Egyptians could not drink of the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt, and the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments." It's interesting. So their false gods did give them power to do things. So, we talked about the false gods being demons in some cases, right? Here's what the gods were of the water to blood. Khnum was an ancient Egyptian god primarily associated with creation, fertility, and the Nile River. He was often depicted as a ram-headed man, and it was believed that he used a potter's wheel to shape human beings from clay. The clay of the Nile River, the river delta. And he was considered the guardian of the source of the Nile. Also, Hapi was a water or river god and was a god of the annual flooding of the Nile. So this repudiated both of those gods, put them in their place, if you will. Second miracle was frogs, Exodus 8:5. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying unto Aaron, stretch forth thine hand with thy rod over the streams and the rivers and the ponds, and cause frogs to come up upon the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. Well, Hekwet is a frog-headed goddess who personified generation, birth, and fertility. She was sometimes depicted with the body of a frog, and frog amulets were common in ancient Egypt as charms for fertility. So God literally killed the frogs, an ultimate show of power against the frog goddess. Verse 13 and 14. And the Lord did according to the words of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the village, and out of the fields, and they gathered them together upon heaps, and the land stank. Miracle 3. Dust of the earth turns to lice. Verse 17 through 19. And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice. In man and in beast, all the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. So there were lice upon man and upon beast. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. That's the god Geb, god of the earth. So he had power over the earth. Sometimes they believed his laughter was earthquakes. And they turned the dust of the earth into lice, or God did. Plague 4 was flies. Starting in verse 20, it says, And the Lord said unto Moses, Rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water, and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thy houses, and the houses of Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground wherein they are. And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there. To the end thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth, and I will put a division between my people and thy people. So this was possibly the goddess Uatchit, goddess of the marshes, translated swarm sometimes. More likely it was the god of the air, Shu. Also there was a god Khepri, which was a scarab beetle, god of the morning sun that symbolized creation, renewal, and rebirth. And the scarab beetle's transformation from inert matter. It could bring life out of nothing. So we don't know for sure which one this was against, but clearly God was bringing in a swarm of flies to show that he had power over the insects in the air. The next one was diseased animals. This was plague 5. Lots of gods for their animals. So that's in Exodus 9, verse 3. Behold, the hand of the Lord is upon thy cattle, which is in the field, upon the horses, upon the asses, upon the camels, upon the oxen, upon the sheep. There shall be a very grievous murrain, and that's pestilence or disease. And the Lord shall sever between the cattle of Israel and the cattle of Egypt, and there shall nothing die of all that is the children of Israel. So this was against the goddess Hathor. She is usually portrayed as a cow, and Hathor oversaw the fertility of humans and livestock. Also, Ammon was portrayed as a ram. He was associated with fertility and creation and was seen as protector of those things. And he was considered the king of the gods. Nevis was depicted as a black bull with a solar disk between his horns. And Khnum, the one I mentioned earlier, was depicted with a ram's head. So all these gods of the livestock and stuff, fertility. And then plague 6 was boils. Exodus 9, verse 8. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, Take you handfuls of ashes of the furnace, and let Moses sprinkle it toward the heaven in the sight of Pharaoh, and it shall become small dust in all the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. Boils on the bottoms of their feet. That's freaking horrid. But this was the god Sekhmet, and it was a goddess, of the hot desert, sun, and plagues, chaos, war, and healing. So plagues and healing, and God demonstrated power over that. And then number 7 was hail and fire in chapter 9, 23 and 24. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt. This was against 2 gods, Nut, the goddess of the sky, and Seth, which is the god of storms, chaos, and disorder. Plague number 8 was locusts, and that's Exodus 10:13 through 15. There's two gods here. Bastet is what a lot of Christian scholars talk about, but I don't think so. Bastet was the protector of homes and women and was depicted as a cat. So I don't know how that fits with the locusts. I tend to think it's Osiris, was the goddess of fertility and vegetation, because the locusts ate everything in the land in verse 15. Also, Osiris was the ruler of the underworld and judge of the dead. Sorry, that's a he. Both roles made him God over the cycle of life and death. So that's the one I think it is. But anyways, like I said, the scholars differ on the different gods because there were so many of them. Plague number 9 was in Exodus 10:22, and Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. So sorry, guys, I do not think that was a solar eclipse. They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days, but all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. So they couldn't even see each other. You're standing next to them and you can't see them. Solar eclipses don't do that because you still have the light from the stars. Okay. So this was a miracle. There's no, there's thick darkness that I can't even see my hand in front of my face on this one. And then I go across the river to the other side and I have light. That was a clear miracle. And this was against Ra, the sun god, Aten, which was another sun god, and possibly Horus, believed to be the god of the sky and war. Now, plague 10 was the death of the firstborn, Exodus 12:29. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne, and to the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Pharaoh himself was seen as a god. This attacked his lineage as a god. His firstborn, his line, could not continue. It was also direct repayment for Pharaoh's genocidal massacre of all the Hebrew boys. And it was an attack on any god or goddess of protection or life. Destroyed everything. In one fell swoop, every family felt this attack. The nation was brought to its knees. So what can we learn from the 10 plagues of Egypt? Well, of course, God keeps his promises. The whole 400 years thing, and God came back just as he promised, brought them out of the land and brought them to the land of Canaan. God is obviously more powerful than 2,000 gods of Egypt. Any false god, any fallen angel, any deity, he is more powerful than, because he created the universe, right? So this was the start of teaching God's chosen people, the nation, the people that had become a nation, as opposed to individuals, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 sons, Joseph, talking individually by dreams to Joseph and things like that. This was mass teaching to the entire nation now, that scholars believe it was almost 2 million people, teaching them about sin and sacrifice, atonement, and the lamb that will save you from sin, from death, from destruction, right? Now, there's interesting end times ramifications regarding Israel being spared while the plagues rained down on Egypt. They still suffered through it, and even some of the plagues, the first 2 or 3, I think it was. But then God drew a line. It was like, no, you're not going to suffer anymore. And they did not have the experiences that the Egyptians did. And of course, the Messiah, that prophecy of the Messiah with the Lamb, and adoption of those who choose to sojourn among them, stuff like that. There's a lot of end time stuff in here that's pretty cool. And we'll get into that one day. But until then, keep searching for the truth. Thanks for listening, guys. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I would ask that you consider subscribing if you have the means to do so. $5 a month is all it takes on Spotify. Every little bit helps. And if you just want to do it for 1 month, that's fine. I appreciate anything you can do. It's a gift. I'm not charging for the gospel, okay? But I do need money, and this is, one of the things that I work on and spend a lot of time on every week to be able to post these podcasts. Also, please share with your friends on social media. Facebook really works, showing a preview of the podcast when you share the link. And as always, I respond personally to my emails. So if you email me, angrypatriot42@yahoo.com, I'll definitely respond. If you leave comments, I'll respond. I'm real personable. I have no problem talking individually with people. I even have done some counseling in the past, and I do have a network of counselors through Faith Baptist Church in Lafayette, Indiana, biblical counselors who are certified to help people. I have a lot of resources. So I'm able to do things, even though it's just over the internet and I don't really know you. One of the reasons I got my ordination was so that I can do the vaccine exemptions. I still do that. Just understand it's a religious exemption, so you've got to be able to email me something that lists your name and says that you believe the Bible is true or that you follow Jesus Christ. Something to show me that it's your religion for corporate purposes. I think it's sad that we have to do that, especially, in America that's supposed to have religious freedom. It's terrible that they're demanding people show what religion they follow, which to me is just building a database of Christians for the end times, but whatever. I think it's important that you not take the vaccine. And so I'm willing to help with that. I think it's a health crisis that's deliberately forced upon people and they're trying to harm people with the vaccines. Anyways, just wanted to put that stuff in your mind. So please like and share, comment, and if you can, subscribe. I really appreciate it. And at the very least, just keep listening, guys. Pray for those who need it. Pray for our nation. Pray for our leaders and those who are doing what is right and just in this country. And I'm just going to flat out, I'm not going to say that. God bless. Keep searching for the truth, guys.